Good Sunday evening. Welcome to a new episode of the Spotted Pod. So let's go ahead and talk about the San Antonio Spurs and how they have been doing in this past week since I last recorded an episode a week ago on a Sunday. So for the Spurs, if you're looking for the win-loss column, wasn't too good of a week for the Spurs. Should have probably come out 3-1 in this past week, but then instead they come out 1-3. So let's do a quick recap of the Spurs' week. Beginning with last Monday, the Spurs are on the road at Los Angeles against the Clippers in the new arena for the Clippers. So this is why I say the Spurs should have gone 3-1. Let's start with this first game. The Spurs are up by 26 at the end of the first quarter. So again, a 26-point lead. You would think that they're going to go on to hold on for this win, especially that the Clippers are dealing with some injuries with them. All-star Kawhi Leonard out for this game. Well, no, the Clippers fought back and they ended up winning they led by as many as 12 points, but they ended up winning the game by 9 points. The Clippers, though, I would say were favored in this game. But again, if you're the Spurs, you lead by 26 points, you should still hold on for a win. But unfortunately, it wasn't the Spurs' night for those final three quarters, and the Clippers made that comeback, and so they ended up winning that game. Then we go to Wednesday. The Spurs are still on the road. They're at Houston. And the Rockets were favored by 6.5 in this game, and it was more than 6.5. The final result. Houston basically dominated this game from the get-go. They were up by double digits early in the first quarter. They led by as many as 29 points in this game, and so when it was all said and done, the Spurs lost by 27 points. Acting head coach Mitch Johnson for the Spurs, he pulled most of the starters about midway through the fourth, or actually early in the fourth, just because the Spurs did have a game the next night in San Antonio against Portland. And so now let's go to that next game, the game against Portland, which is the Spurs' only win of this past week. So the Spurs are on the second night of a back-to-back against the Portland Trailblazers. They are favored by 4, San Antonio is, and they end up winning this game. They led by as many as 14 points, but they really took over, the Spurs did, in the third quarter when they went up by double digits, and then they ended up holding on for a comfortable 13-point win with I think it was like the last 3 or 2 minutes left. Chauncey Billups, the coach, the Portland Trailblazers, pulled most of his starters, and so that was ball game for the Spurs. They ended up getting their only win of the week on that game against Portland. And then the most recent game came on Saturday. The Spurs are still at home. They're hosting the Utah Jazz. The Spurs were actually favored by 6.5 in this game. This is the most they've been favored by so far through their 10 games in the season. They haven't been favored in many games, but still, this was their biggest the biggest favorability, I guess you would say, that they were favored to win by 6.5. And no, that did not happen. It was a very close game back and forth between both teams. Nobody actually got more than a 9-point lead, which was Utah, and then the Spurs' biggest lead was, I think, 6. The Jazz did have a better player back in terms of Lauri Markkanen, who did not play in that first game against the Spurs on Halloween night. So Markkanen was back. And so the Spurs, again, it went back and forth. By the time the final 5 minutes came in this game, both teams were tied at 95. And no, I mean, Utah made more plays, and they made their free throws down the stretch. And so they were able to hold on for the 1-point win, did the Jazz. So the Jazz got an upset win against the Spurs, winning by 1 point. And so before I move on from this Utah game, I do want to talk about a player who came back to the lineup and looked really good in his first game, and that was Devin Vassell. Vassell came off the bench after even though we think he's going to be a starter, as the season progresses, but still, he came off the bench in his first game back from injury. He hadn't played an NBA game since March 29th of last season, off that foot injury that he was healing from after he had to have offseason surgery. He looked, like he hadn't missed a step here. So in the first quarter, he got a few minutes off the bench. He did take 2 shots, kind of forced him a little bit just to kind of see where his game was at. And then he took a break. But then in the second quarter, he just comes in and starts dominating. He ended up scoring 10 points in the second quarter. Just one thing you see from him is his ability to get the mid-range jumper, which we know Vassell can do. But when you've been watching the Spurs now for like 9 games, but without Vassell, you see that aside from maybe like Chris Paul and maybe like Malaki Branham, it's really tough for a lot of the players to kind of just navigate their way with the pull-up mid-ranger. And so Vassell shows that he can do that. If there's really nothing there in the offense, he can take a few dribbles, use a screen or get a dribble handoff and get himself a nice-looking mid-range jumper. And of course, he shoots efficiently. He ended up scoring 8 points from the mid-range on this game on 4 or 5 shooting. And then, of course, we know that one thing the Spurs have been needing is 3-point shooting, and that's definitely something Vassell is going to bring the team. In his first game back already, he made 3 3-point shots. 2 of them were on pull-up action, and then on his one spot up, it was pretty deep, like 2 feet off the 3-point line. So yes, I mean, he was on a minutes restriction. He only played like 23 minutes in this game, but he looked great already in his first game back. Now, again, I don't think he's going to shoot this efficiently right away in every single game back, but at least it looked like he got in a good rhythm in his first game back. when he was asked after the game, if he's going to start in the next game on Monday against the Kings, he had said, that's up to the coaching staff. And so again, we'll kind of see if the coaching staff wants to insert him into the lineup right away, or if they want him to kind of slowly ease his way back in. And he's probably going to be on a minutes restriction for a few games, per the medical staff. And so that's kind of what the guidelines the Spurs will follow. But again, they're going to be getting some added help here on the offensive end with Vassell back. And as I'm going to talk about here in a little bit, they definitely need some help on the offensive end. So when we recap their week, Las Vegas said they should have gone 2-2. The Spurs, underwhelmed this week where they went 1-3. Again, I think like I said, the fact that they were up by 26 against the Clippers, they ended up beating Portland, and then they should have beat the Jazz. They should have gone 3-1 this week, but again, they ended up going 1-3, and that's what their record is. So they ended up going overall for the season. They are now 4-6 through 10 games. Before I move on to how the Spurs are doing through 10 games, I want to do a deep dive into their stats here. I do want to talk about some injury updates. So there's a bunch of injuries. You can see on the card, but anyway, there's a bunch of injuries that the team's dealing with. Of course, as you all know, some unfortunate an illness, got to Coach Pop where he has it's an undisclosed illness. We don't know what it is. The team hasn't provided any information, but Coach Pop hasn't been back with the team since the game before the Minnesota game at home. So basically the team again, they haven't really revealed any information. They've just said it's an undisclosed illness that pops out indefinitely according to different reporting. And so the team is being coached right now by acting head coach Mitch Johnson, who is currently a Spurs assistant coach. So again, we're hoping that Pop gets back to the sidelines as soon as possible. But again, for right now, the acting head coach is Mitch Johnson, the assistant coach for the Spurs. Jeremy Sochan during the week, he also sustained an injury where he fractured his left thumb, so he had to have surgery this past week on that thumb. It went by successfully, the surgery, but the team has not provided a timeline. When Mitch Johnson was asked about Sochan's status as far as like when is he going to return, he basically said it's going to be a few weeks for Jeremy to first see how he heals from the surgery, and then from there they'll start to develop a game plan in terms of when's he going to start making his return to the court. So again, right now he's just out for weeks is what it looks like with that thumb injury. And Sochan was off to a really good start. I would also say that the Spurs, if we start to see a little bit of slippage in their defensive numbers, it's because Sochan is now gone, and he's been a really good player for them defensively to start the year. So again, Jeremy Sochan is out of the current lineup right now with dealing with the left thumb injury. Trey Jones, as we know, he was injured after the first game of the season with a right ankle sprain. At that time, right after the injury happened, Coach Pop had said that he would be out about 2 weeks. So that 2-week marker is kind of coming up. There's been really no timetable yet on him in terms of when's he coming back. All Mitch Johnson said was that he's recovering well. He's responding, I guess, to the treatment well, but the Spurs haven't put him out as far as day to day or anything like that. So right now we don't really have an update on Trey Jones when he's coming back, but it should be pretty soon here. And then Malaki Branham got injured in one of the games this past week, and it wasn't a severe injury. It was a right ankle sprain in one of the games, and so he's listed currently as day to day. So that's kind of his injury status. So he's actually listed as questionable for the Spurs' Monday game against the Kings. So again, Branham should probably be back in the lineup at some point this week. So he's not dealing with too big of an injury. And so that's an injury update for the Spurs. And then, like I said earlier, the good news is that Devin Vassell is back in the lineup, after he missed all 9 games to open the season. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to start talking about some different areas for the Spurs. I kind of did this last week, but now that we have more data, it's been 10 games now. So we have a pretty, still a small sample size, but a decent sample size here through 10 games of what a team is. At this point, like I said, game 20 is usually the better marker of where you start looking at, the numbers don't shift too much on either end of the floor once you get to that 20 game marker. And so for now, we're just going to go with the 10 games that the Spurs have played so far. So first, let's begin with the good stuff, which is defense. This team has been a good defense so far this year. Last week I think they were like 4th when I did my episode, but they've slipped a little bit. But they're still a top 10 defense. So right now, overall on defense, on defensive rating, they're 9th. And then I'm going to go through all the categories that they're top 10 in because there's a bunch here. Opponent effective field goal percentage. When you combine the 3 with the 2, they're doing a great job here. They're 8th here. Opponent free throw rate, not putting your opponent on the free throw line. They are 9th here. Opponent offensive rebound percentage. They are 9th here as well. So they're doing a great job of not giving up too many extra chances. I will say there are certain matchups where the Spurs can be at a disadvantage in rebounding, and that is shown. There was a game recently. It wasn't the Jazz game. I forgot who it was, but they played someone where they got a bunch of offensive rebounds on that team. Oh, it was Zubac with the Clippers on Monday. That was one of the reasons why the Clippers made a comeback, is that Zubac really dominated the offensive glass. So I think that if you have a very a big center there with a lot of physical size, the Spurs can be at a disadvantage against certain opponents that have centers like that. So someone like Zubac is who the Spurs had difficulty with, but on most nights, their average, again, they're ninth in opponent offensive rebound percentage. The Spurs are also 10th right now in opponent 3-point attempt, opponent 3-point attempts. So here I would say it's more matchup dependent. Again, it depends who they're playing. Like the Clippers took a bunch of threes, and that was tough for the Spurs' defense. Whereas someone like the Jazz that team didn't take as many threes, and so it's a little bit easier for the Spurs to guard. I know the Rockets take a lot of threes, but in their blowout win of the Spurs, they actually attacked more so on the twos. Of course, having Wemby on your team is going to make you a very good a blocking team, a team that blocks shots. And so the Spurs are ranked third here in total blocks per game. Defensive rebound, they're doing a great job here, seventh. And then also a half court defense, according to Cleaning the Glass, they are ranked fourth. Continuing some really good stuff for the Spurs. They are fourth in opponent points per game, just scoring overall. They're doing a good job as far as defending the rim in terms of the restricted area, which is that what I like to call that dunk layup range. They're fourth here in terms of opponent rim accuracy. So the Spurs, having Wemby right there near the paint, are doing a good job deterring shots there. Opponent floater percentage is also down for the opponent. It's the Spurs are eighth here, so they're doing a great job here. And then of course free throw makes is down for the opponent. The Spurs are fifth here. So again, those are the areas where the Spurs are doing a great job defensively. They're top 10 in all these different categories this year. And then there's not too many red flags on the defensive end for the Spurs so far to begin the year. I would just say one of the areas where they're 25th is it is a problem, but it's not really the defense's fault. It's more so the offense's fault for the Spurs. It's opponent fast break points. So because of how much the Spurs are turning the ball over, opponents of course are getting more chances to get out on the break against the Spurs, and they're scoring 17 points a night against the Spurs' defense, which ranks them 25th in opponent fast break scoring. So again, if the Spurs can figure out their turnover issue, then that's going to help that number go down a little bit. And then I would also say, like I said, not every team shoots a lot of threes against the Spurs, but on those certain kind of matchups, that those teams that do shoot a lot of threes, that can be a problem for the Spurs because they are ranked 17th in opponent 3-point makes. But again, 17th is right slightly below league average. It's not a huge cause for concern. So again, there's a lot more positives for the Spurs. Defensively, I am interested to see again. Do they have a little bit of a slip with Sochan out for these next few weeks, or the fact that like they were sliding Stephon Castle into the starting lineup, and he's a good defender. Are they able to kind of keep pace and maybe just move a few positions down defensively in terms of their rankings? So again, that'll be kind of something to watch. But just the fact that they have Victor out there on the floor is always going to keep them as a top 10 defense. And like I said in the last episode, they need to keep within that top 10 range defensively, because when end of the year voting comes up for defensive player of the year, of course Wemby's going to have all the individual stats, how much he's blocking shots at the rim and all over the place. I'm getting steals, deflections. But then one of the knocks on him last year was the fact that the overall team defense overall was a bottom 10 defense. And so now whether Wemby's overall, their overall number right now is currently ninth. So again, they want to stay in that top 10 range defensively for the season, so that Wemby has a good chance of getting that defensive player of the year award this coming season. All right. So now that I've talked about all the good stuff, which is the defense, let's talk about some of the areas where the Spurs need to make some improvements this year. And so let's begin with the offensive end. So there's not a lot of strengths for this team when you look at their numbers. I'm going to go through just a few of them. Again, there's not a lot. There's only 3 that I actually wrote down here. So assist percentage, they are ninth. So again, top 10 here in terms of how often do they get an assist on their made shots? They're ninth here, but that is a bit of a slip compared to last year's team. They were actually first last year in this category. So again, still top 10 here in assist percentage. So they get credit for some ball movement. 3-point attempts is pretty, it's kind of right where they were last year. So last year they finished 11th in terms of 3-point attempts per game. Right now they're at 12th. And then restricted area field goal percentage, finishing at the rim. This has made an improvement from last year. Right now they're 9th in terms of restricted area field goal percentage. Last year they were 16th. But now we get to the part where they're struggling, which is a bunch of different areas. So let's talk about all these different areas. So these are places, a lot of them where they're in the bottom 10 defensively. So first of all, offensive rating is 27th. So again, they're struggling to score the ball. Fast break scoring is down. They're 27th in this category as well. Effective field goal percentage, when you combine the 2-point shot with the 3-point shot, what is your accuracy? And they're 20th here. Free throw rate, they don't get to the free throw line that much, 25th here. Turnover percentage is, like I said, the big one. They're turning the ball over 17% of their possessions. That's 27th. That's one that Coach Johnson says that he's still, working on, that's the one that really bothers him the most out of a lot of their different statistics. Pace is also really taking a hit here this current season through 10 games. Last year, the Spurs were third in pace. Right now, they're 23rd, and it's kind of hard to pinpoint, who is, which players are making them play a little bit slower. Because even when I look at, I think their pace, their pace is like at 98 right now, 98 possessions per 48 minutes. And when I look at the numbers of the players that are out on the floor, when this happens, it's like almost like all the players in the rotation. It's Sochan first, then it's Barnes, then it's Stephon Castle, then it's Julian Champagnie, Keldon Johnson, Blake Wesley, Chris Paul, and then Victor Wembanyama. So again, it's pretty much the entire rotation. It's not like one player specifically sticks out. I would just say from the eye test, I think that when I watched the team, again, more so by the eye test, it's too in terms of individual players, I would say it's just the fact that they have more, like, I would say more traditional point guards out there, like a player like Chris Paul, a player like Stephon Castle, who brings the ball down a little bit slower, kind of navigates the offense, tells them where to go. The players, what's the next play as they're bringing the ball up in the half court. So again, I think that's part of it, is the fact that they have more traditional point guards now on this roster. And the other part, of course, is the fact that they're always playing a lot of frenetic pace because of their turnover situation, where they're not really able to get an offensive flow, and then the defense can get set against them in the half court, and it becomes really tricky for them. A lot of times too, defenders are backing off a lot of their shooters so that they can go double or triple team Wemby at different times. So again, I think they just can't get into a flow offensively, and that's one of the reasons why we do see that their pace is taking a hit here. And again, if you're playing slower basketball and you're a team that's already struggling to score, that makes it harder to get more efficient shots, because now the defense can set up in the half court against you, and it makes it a lot tougher. Points per game, they're 29th, so again, struggling there. They're 18th in points in the paint. So again, part of taking more threes means that they're going to lose a little bit now attacking inside. So that's kind of something to watch. 24th in free throws made. 3-point field goal percentage is actually starting to improve a little bit these last few games, but they're 22nd overall. So again, bottom 10 in terms of making 3-point shots accurately. And then wide open three-point percentage is at 18th. And again, you want to, if the fact that teams are leaving a lot of their players open on purpose, the Spurs, you would want that number to be more so in the top 10. If not, they're struggling. And then of course, in the half court offense, they are ranked as 17th, according to Cleaning the Glass. So again, I am interested to see, what do the numbers offensively look like after like 10 games of having Devin Vassell back on the floor? Because I think that's going to be the interesting part. They're adding a more efficient shooter to the Spurs, a player who can score all around the floor, not just from the 3-point line. He can get into the mid range, as I mentioned earlier. He's going to be able to attack and create for his teammates as well, is what we've seen Vassell be able to do throughout his early career. And so I do want to see, does the offensive numbers take make a little bit of a gain here with Devin Vassell back in the rotation after multiple games. Okay, so now I want to, lastly, before we close out this episode, I want to talk about 3 different individual players for the Spurs from this past week, and then also just looking at their numbers overall, these players. So the first player is Victor Wembanyama. Again, the numbers I'm presenting are for the season, but I pulled these 3 players because they kind of stood out when you look at just the numbers from this past week. So overall for the season, Wemby's playing in 31 minutes per game, scoring 18.3 points, shooting 15 shots a night, making 43% of his shots. The big increase for him has been his 3-point attempts, seven 3-point attempts per game, 7.1 technically. He's making only 28% of them, but that's actually an improvement compared to the game before Utah, when he was actually only making 23% of them. 3.6 free throw attempts for the team, and 9.92% free throw accuracy is Wemby's producing. He's also collecting 10.2 rebounds per game, which is 16th. Even though he doesn't always get double doubles in terms of rebounds, he does have some monster rebound games. He's had a 20 rebound night so far. He had a 16 rebound night recently as well. He's also collecting 1.4 steals, which leads the team. He's getting 4 blocks per game, which is leading the league in blocks by more than I think it was who is it? Chet's like at 2.9. So again, more than a block than the next person next to him. Wemby with 4 blocks per game. Deflections, 3.9 deflections per 36 minutes. And then of course, 12.3 contested shots per 36 minutes. And then in terms of ball movement, 2.4 assists to 3.7 turnovers. And he does unfortunately rank 9th in turnovers per game league wide. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to kind of dive into Wemby's shot selection. That's kind of been a lot of the conversation that's going on right now, is whether or not he's taking too many threes, and why is he not going and scoring inside. So that's kind of why I want to dive into this part of the conversation and kind of dig into the data, plus kind of what I've seen in the eye test as well. So he is taking a lot of threes. Obviously, this season so far, he's seen a huge increase in his 3-point rate according to Pivot Fade, a basketball app. 46% of his shots right now are coming from the 3-point line, whereas a year ago it was 33% of his shots. So he's taking 13% more of his shots are coming from three, almost half his shots basically at 46%. His and he's only and then his, as far as his mid-rangers as well, 17% of his shots are coming from mid-range, and he's only making 23% of those shots. And like I mentioned earlier with his 3-point shot, he's only making 28% of those, but that was that going 6-9 against the Jazz helped his number out because it was at 23%. And then when I look at his wide open threes, he actually brought his wide open three percentage, his accuracy, up to 40%, which is actually a good number here. And 49% of his attempts are being taken wide open. And then his pull up three is where he's really struggling here at 27% accuracy. So here's what I want to say: just both watching the eye test and then also watching some film and then watching how defenses guard Wemby, plus these numbers as well. I think that part of it is something that Coach Mitch Johnson said, is that this year coming in, teams are guarding him differently. I think that we've seen a lot more teams be willing to back off Spurs shooters, and really make it difficult for Wemby to kind of isolate or work against his individual defender, because he's seen 2 or 3 bodies come his way right away, especially as soon as he puts the ball on the floor. So two of the ways the Spurs have tried to get him involved, so far this year inside the arc, is by kind of getting the ball at the elbow and letting him try to, almost like post up from out there and kind of make it face up and kind of make his moves. But again, even when he does that, the defenses kind of swarm him. So again, he's not able to create for himself or others in that way. Of course, they put him in the pick and roll, and it's worked a few times where, maybe he's gotten a few lobs from Chris Paul or some other players on the team, but it doesn't always work. A lot of times defenses will corral him and make sure that he can't receive the ball on the roll. And of course, they'll leave Chris Paul open, or Stephon Castle, or whoever's running the initial screen. I mean, whoever's running the pick, or not the pick, the ball handler in that possession. So that's kind of what you've seen too, is that they don't trust those guard shooters or wing shooters, and so they're going to let those players take the shot and make sure that they collapse on Victor to make sure they prevent his looks at the rim. So they're really focusing on taking away the rim from Victor. One thing we've seen the Spurs do a few times is, and I wrote about this and did a deep dive in a film rewatch, is they are starting to have an off screen being set for Victor, where Victor's kind of standing in a corner. He has a teammate come and set a screen for him. Then he kind of goes around that screen and he kind of gets to the free throw line area. And then, whoever has the ball passes it to him from there. And so basically, if they can get him the ball there at the free throw line before the defense kind of gets set, he's able to make his move quickly, whether he wants to shoot like a mid-ranger or try to drive by his defender. And then that allows him to kind of quickly attack the defense before that collapse can happen, and they can really send 2 or 3 players his way. And so I think that's why we do see the part of that. So again, just the fact that the Spurs and Victor are trying to have to go through all these different methods just to get him an easy look at the rim. That's probably why he ends up settling for more 3-point looks, because the fact that we see that 49% of his shots are being taken wide open means that, one, that's a shot that the defense is kind of giving him right now. And so he's mentioned in multiple interviews that he thinks that, if that shot's there, he's going to take it. He feels that he can make it. He had a good shooting night, like I said, against the Jazz, but before that he was shooting 23% for the year. So I think it's going to be, I don't think he's going to end the year at 46% of his attempts being taken from 3, but I think that they got to find a way to again get him more involved in terms of being able to attack the rim within the arc. And I do wonder if, now that Vassell's coming back, a high volume 3-point shooter who defenses cannot leave open on purpose, if that's going to help out with the spacing, which will allow Victor to attack a little bit more, so that he doesn't have to be as reliant on that 3-point shot. So again, I'm really interested to see what Victor's shot selection does look like by like game 20 here in 10 more games, and seeing has it changed a little bit? Has he decreased a little bit? How have the Spurs got him the ball a little bit more to attack inside? And so that's kind of some of those conversations. I will say, though, that if the Spurs as a team don't increase their 3-point percentage, then that's going to lead to defenses continuing to corral the paint, and basically Victor is going to have to basically continue to probably take a lot more mid-rangers or 3-point looks, because that's probably the only shot where he gets some space available to him. So again, it's kind of like a wait and see mode right now, and I kind of understand why those questions are coming up of why is he not shooting or taking as many attempts in the basket and mainly going to the 3-point line. All right, the next player I want to talk about is rookie Stephon Castle. So he had a pretty good week here where we've seen him start to increase his scoring average, and actually his points in game specifically have hit career highs in multiple games here. Part of it is that Jeremy Sochan is now out, so Castle has gotten more minutes, and he's also gotten more responsibility. The fact that he's been able to start with some of the starters, and so let's just go through his base numbers for the year. 23 minutes per game right now for the season, 8.4 points, taking 8 shots a game, making 37% of them. 3 3-pointers he's attempting and making only 19% of them. And then he's also shooting 2.4 free throw attempts, making 67% of his free throws. And I will say that that's a number that stands out, the 2.4 free throw attempts, because according to Cleaning the Glass, Castle is in the, I believe, 89th percentile in drawing shooting fouls, according amongst combo guards out there, is what the Cleaning the Glass lists Castle as his position. So again, he's showing that he's starting to learn how to draw contact, and we've seen that in multiple games here where he really drives downhill and is very aggressive, whether it's against a big or a guard or whoever, and he's using his physicality to not only make the shot, but also get some contact with that shot and get himself to the free throw line. Defensively, 2.5 rebounds per game, 0.9 steals, but that's actually pretty high here in terms of steal percentage. He's in the 75th percentile amongst combo guards, according to Cleaning the Glass. 0.3 blocks, 2.2 deflections per 36, and then 4.3 contested shots per 36. I think one thing that I've definitely seen from Castle is that opponents are learning that, if you have the ball in your hands and you're just trying to throw it to your teammate, and Castle's guarding your teammate right here to the right or the left of you, you better be very direct with that pass, because if it's kind of like lazy and it's not fully has a lot of force on it, Castle's going to pick it off, and that's something that he's definitely shown in these last few games that I've really noted from him. As far as his passing numbers, 2.5 assists to 1 turnover. So again, not too bad there. Let's see, 6 points created off of his assists per game, according to Pivot Fade, a basketball app, and then 0.4 bad pass turnovers, according to Pivot Fade. So again, not that many of his turnovers are because of bad passes, is what it's looking like. And then the players that he's assisted to most so far this year are Keldon Johnson with 5 assists. Malaki Branham with 4 assists, and then also Victor Wembanyama with 4 assists. And then just what we see from his offensive shot diet, again, that's part of the game that he's kind of growing on. It's kind of the part that's kind of trying to he's gonna have to make some growth here. 51% of his shots do come in the paint, 34% of his shots do come from 3, and then 12% of his shots from mid-range. On his wide open threes, we do see that the defense is leaving him open on purpose, where 68% of his shots are being taken wide open. He's only making 21% of those shots. And so like I mentioned, he set new career highs recently in this past week, where he scored, I believe it was like 11 points in a game, then 14 points, and then most recently he went up to 23 points against Utah. And so he definitely has a lot of confidence in his 3-point shot. Like I said, the numbers don't look too great at 19%, but he did mention how he's constantly putting in the work on his shot. He ended up making 3 early in the first quarter against Utah, and he also said that his teammates and the coaching staff have a lot of faith in his shot. They have an encouragement. They want him to continue to shoot his 3. They feel like it's going to eventually start to fall. So again, he's going to continue to do that. And like I said, it's kind of like this season as a rookie, it's more like a blank slate for him offensively. He's just trying to figure everything out, kind of attacking. It's taking some threes if they're there for him. So again, it's just interesting to watch Castle as he continues to go through his rookie season. All right, the last player who had a pretty good week was Julian Champagnie, and I want to talk about just how he's been doing this season, and then also where his place is in the rotation. He and Castle, who I talked about a while ago, because now that Devin Vassell is coming back. So for the season, Champagnie's averaging 28 minutes a night, scoring 10 points per game, taking 8.6 shots, shooting 45% from the floor, 6.3 3-point attempts. So again, behind Wemby, he's the second high volume shooter for the Spurs, and Julian is making 37% of his outside looks. 0.5 free throw attempts, and 80% free throw accuracy. Let's see here. Oh, so regarding his 3-point shot, he's doing a great job in the corners, and that's one of the areas that the Spurs want him to be in, is the corners, to be a threat out there. And so he's making 46% of his threes from the corners. That's one of the parts, one of the areas that's bringing up his percentage, because if you just look at his above the break threes, his arc threes, he's only shooting 31% from there. And then you can tell defenses are worried about him because they don't leave him open very often. Because when he, I think it's like 30% of his shots are taken wide open from 3, but he's making 50% of his shots when he does get a wide open 3. So again, they don't want to leave him wide open. He's one of those players that is dangerous out there to the opposing defense. Defensively, his numbers: 5.3 rebounds, 0.7 steals, 0.5 blocks, 2.5 deflections per 36, and then 5.6 contested shots. And we do know that on certain nights, he gets some of the better perimeter players or wing players out there is his defensive matchups. And he has a knack to get some blocks as well. He's an underrated player who knows how to block shots. And so what I do want to say about him is, where it's going to be interesting to see now that Vassell's back. Where's his place in rotation? Are the Spurs going to go to having Castle come off the bench now that Vassell's back? Whenever Vassell goes back in the starting lineup, or are they going to probably are they going to bring Champagnie off the bench? Because had Vassell not been injured to start the year, Vassell was going to start, and so Champagnie would have probably started off on the bench for the team. And so that's kind of one of the key questions that I'm interested to see is whenever Vassell does get back put into the starting lineup, is it Champagnie who goes back to the bench, or is it Castle? And then whoever is the player that gets sent to the bench, are those players still as productive even coming off with the second unit? So again, that's something interesting to watch and see as the season progresses. So all right, so before I close up this episode, I do want to encourage you to visit the spotupshot.com. Just some of the write-ups and film that I have up there is I've been writing about each analysis of each of the games that the Spurs have played in. I also had a recent piece, film rewatch over the Spurs' game against the Portland Trailblazers, where I looked at some different individual clips on both ends of the floor. So make sure that you check out the spotupshot.com. And of course, the podcast comes out each week. So thank you all for listening to the podcast. For the Spurs, they're scheduled this upcoming week. They have the Kings on Monday. The Spurs are hosting the Kings. The Kings are going to be on the second night of a back-to-back, so that should be a very winnable game for San Antonio. On Wednesday, they host the Washington Wizards. The Spurs are probably going to be favored in this game, so they need to make sure they win it, unlike what they didn't do against Utah recently. So again, those games where they play like Portland, Utah, Washington, some of those teams that the Spurs should be favored, and they got to try to get those as automatic wins. If not, they could be not meeting their expectations that they set for themselves toward the end of the year. Friday, the Spurs host the Los Angeles Lakers for their first meeting against the Lakers. Again, that's on Friday in San Antonio, and then they have a back-to-back on Saturday. They fly to Dallas, where they're going to play their second game against the Dallas Mavericks. So again, that's the upcoming schedule for the Spurs this week. Just looking at it, let's see. I think they should probably go possibly 2-2, maybe the win, get a win against Sacramento because they're on the second night of back-to-back, get a win against Washington, and then maybe again that's a tough back-to-back against the Lakers and the Mavericks. But again, who knows? We'll see what happens in the games that are played.